In the mid-19th century, very few states in the U.S. had a mandatory public education system. Private schools outnumbered public ones. As a result, tuition rates were very high. You had to pay tuition for elementary education. Those who could not afford it took a pauper's oath, which involved swearing that you were too poor and destitute to pay for tuition. And by doing that, this was like a legal contract, really. And by doing that, you would receive free tuition. Parents would receive free tuition for their children. Within a few decades, public schools outnumbered private ones. By 1910, 72% of children attended school, and by 1918, elementary education was compulsory and free for all. By contrast, higher education has remained a mix of semi-public and private institutions, which both charge ever-increasing tuition rates. Tuition has gone up at an annual rate of 7.45%, more than rising healthcare and housing costs. And as you can see here, compared to either medical care or housing costs, tuition is drastically higher at 7.45 compared to 5.8% for medical care and 4.3% for new homes. So, when we talk about the rising costs of healthcare, which is a serious issue, of course, we should also really be talking about the unbelievably rising, increasing costs of higher education. Oh, and if anyone has any comments or questions during this, you can just raise your hand or whatever. In the UW system, average annual tuition increases are at 5.5%, yet Wisconsin invested 8.6% less in the UW system this year, and a staggering 25.4% less in technical colleges. As you can see in the graph on the left-hand side, or your right-hand side. And then as you can see on with the other graph, there's the shifting burden of decreasing public support for higher education, while tuition keeps on increasing more and more as a part of the university's income. So basically, rather than tax dollars going towards funding higher education, you're basically paying more and more of the burden of higher education. And then this is basically a process of a reprivatization of higher education. Organizations such as the Committee for Economic Development, a non-business policy organization, played a major role in setting tuition policy over the last 40 years. The CED pushed strongly for all college students to pay at least 1/3 to 1/2 of their education costs. This was accomplished not only by cutting state funding and raising tuition, but also by replacing financial aid grants with student loans. Federally supported loan aid moved from a low of 17% of total aid in 1975 to 76 to a high of 58% in 2000 and 2001. Loan programs, in effect, privatized the cost of college attendance. So basically, it's a de facto form of privatizing higher education by by pushing all of the financial burden, or most of the financial burden, onto students. And this was then also, from 1976 to 2001, administrative staff employment in colleges and universities increased by over 50%, while employment of non-faculty professionals increased by almost 250%. In a large part, these non-faculty professionals perform functions related to finance, such as managing university investments and developing and maintaining relationships with corporate partners. So basically, what a great deal of your tuition is going towards now is not simply just your education, but towards an entire bureaucracy that exists in order to make more money for the university, really. And as you can see here, the cost of education is goes towards university administration, six-figure salaries, and while some professors are very well paid, most make significantly less than a university president. Adjunct professors make even less as part-time, non-tenured employees. As any institution based upon profit, there are those who generate the profit and those who receive it. And as you can see here, like presidents for both public and private universities make significantly more than even like the highest paid full-time faculty professor. And this doesn't even include adjunct professors who make significantly less than what a full-time faculty professor would make. As throughout the rest of the economy, low-wage part-time jobs with little or no benefits dominate the growth in employment in higher education today. As you can see, part-time faculty has increased by 20% in the last 30 years, while full-time tenured faculty has decreased by about 20% as well. So basically, you have exactly a 20% decrease in professors who have tenure and having a full-time job, and a 20% increase in professors that are just part-time with almost little and no benefits. And in fact, in an article in Salon, it says, quote, "Over 3/4 of college professors are adjunct. Legally, adjunct professors are part-time, at-will employment. Universities pay adjunct professors by the course, anywhere between $1,000 to $5,000. So if a professor teaches 3 courses in both the fall and spring semesters at a rate of $3,000 per course, they'll make $18,000. The average full-time barista makes the same yearly wage. However, a full-time adjunct..." However, a full-time adjunct makes more than works more than 40 hours a week, and they're not paid for most of those hours, unquote. The cost of education has never been higher, yet 53% of college graduates are jobless or underemployed. 62% of those with jobs are in an occupation that requires a college degree, and only 27% of those who are employed have the job closely related to their major. So you go to school, you fall into tens of thousands of dollars into debt, and you get your degree, and then you basically only have 50% chance of finding a job. If you do get a job, you have a 27% chance of getting a job that's even related to what you spent 4 years or more studying and paying for. Earlier this year, President Obama passed an executive order capping student loan payments to 10% of their income and allowing indebted students to enroll in an income-based repayment plan. Yet with 70% of college graduates in debt and 21.8% defaulting on their loans after 3 years, does this really solve the problem? The United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights declares that everyone has a right to education. Quote, "Everyone has a right to education. Education shall be free," unquote. Yet it goes on to say, quote, "at least in the elementary and fundamental stages." At what point does a right not become a right? Should cavity removals be free under a national healthcare system, yet open heart surgery not? Human rights under capitalism is always human rights situated within the confines of the rights of capital and private property. You have a right to free speech, that is if you have access to the corporate media. You have a right to due process so long as you're white. You have a right to education if you can afford it without going into debt. So that brings about the question, what is to be done? And the only effective change that has ever come about in society has come from the masses of people standing up and demanding change. Not from politicians creating watered-down reforms that you still have to pay for everything that you're in debt for, but of course Obama has the mercy of allowing you to just pay 10% of that, or 10% of that in your income, but you still have to pay for all of it. Yet what we really need is systematic change. Students for Democratic Society, which originated from the radical student movements of the 60s and was revived in 2006, has led mass movements demanding change. A most recent victory for the student movement was in Florida, where the state Senate passed House Bill 851, instituting tuition equity for undocumented students at universities. This came after months of students in SDS and the Florida Immigrant Coalition mobilizing for tuition equity, with student government resolutions, teach-ins, rallies, and eventually sit-ins at the Senate chambers, as activists overtly pressured senators to pass the bill. What we learned from this is that thanks to the grassroots efforts of students, undocumented students in Florida now have a more equal access to higher education. So, I mean, we can affect change, and this is proof of it, through grassroots organizing. But mere reforms is not simply just the end of the road. What we need is systematic change in both our higher education and in society as a whole, which for many, when faced with the alternative of paying off mountains of student loan debt, systematic change becomes the only realistic option. To invoke a slogan from May '68 in France, they said, "Be realistic, demand the impossible." And I'd like to switch it over to Andy, who will talk some more about this student movement. Thank you.